because to hate something, you must love the opposite. So
Right.
indifference is
I'm giving my heart back to Jesus, and I'm done. I'm not fighting this anymore. Yeah, I fell to my knees and screamed. It's you hear it, and it takes a minute to process it, for it to hit you. And then when it does, it's like somebody just hits you with a sledgehammer. I can't describe it in a way that can make anybody that hasn't experienced it understand.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Chief here, the professional problem solver, coming to you live for another episode of The Overcomers. I'm so excited about our guest today. He's a brother, he's a great friend, he's a strong man, and I know you're going to be inspired by his strength, by his story, by his amazing relationship with God. Will Ramsey, what a great guy. Will is a pastor. Will is a motivational speaker. He is an adversity overcomer. If there's anyone that qualifies to be on this show, Will definitely fits the bill. So he wants to bring a new perspective. He wants to bring a fresh perspective to the world of business, to the world of car sales, to retail. We're not going to talk about car sales. We're going to talk about life, but I'm just really excited to have him join us for today's episode. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my dear friend and brother, Will Ramsey. Will, welcome.
Good morning, brother. How are you?
Doing really well, doing really well. I'm so glad that you're with us, and I'm so glad that you're going to be able to pour some of your hope to the people watching today and unfold your story. We have a tradition to start with one question, and we're going to get right into it. We want to know a little bit about your upbringing. So I ask all my guests to share a little bit about your parents and your grandparents. I believe in something called ripple effect. So I think that generations, whether it's curse or blessing, it's kind of passed on. And the generations before us definitely had it way worse than us.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes it's just interesting to follow the patterns. And if you could be so kind, please share with us details about your parents. Where were you born? What were they doing? What kind of professions were they in? And then if you remember about your grandparents on your mother's side, on your father's side, and let's start with that.
Well, so let's start out with the grandparents. So I have to tell a little bit about my family before I get into the grandparents. So I'm the youngest of six, and there's a 7-year gap between myself and my next oldest brother. My parents, when I was young, were basically the same age as most people's grandparents. I didn't know the majority of my grandparents. I did not know. The only grandparent that I knew was my father's mother.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough that, well, no, that's not true. My mother's mother as well. She lived to be 96, and my father's mother lived to be 77. But I didn't know either one of my grandfathers. They both passed away when I was very young. My father's father passed away when I was born, the year I was born, and then my mother's father passed away 2 years later. So he passed away when I was 2. So I didn't know either one of my grandfathers. Both of my grandmothers were very strong women. Both of them grew up basically in farm families, very blue collar families. Both of my parents came from, my grandfather on my father's side was a construction worker and a farmer, sharecropper. And so he, very blue collar, very hardworking. On my mother's side, my grandfather was a farmer, but he was also a politician, is my understanding. My mother was very proud of the fact that he was a local politician. And then my grandmother raised, 8 kids, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Might be one more or one less, but I think I'm pretty certain it was 8 kids. So, big families, both sides. So those, come from a very blue collar background is where my family is from. My father and mother, my dad was a construction worker who over time became the vice president in charge of construction of a retirement community. So he was very much a person that believed in education, very much a person that believed in pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and overcoming things. That was kind of his thing. And my mother raised 6 kids. She had different kinds of jobs, but mostly administrative. So didn't really have a career. She worked in different things just to help the family over time. My parents divorced when I was very young. They divorced when I was 14 years old. They had been married for 31 years, went through some different things and ended up splitting. What's crazy about it, though, is typically when you come from a split home, when the parents remarry, they usually remarry multiple times. Well, that's not the case in my family. My parents divorced. They both remarried, and my father was married to his wife until the day he died. He died a year and a half ago. They were married 40 years. And then my mother is still alive and still currently married. She turns 91 on the 2nd of November. And she's still married to her second husband. And I want to say they're 38 or 39 years in. So, so both my parents have basically been married 70 years of their adult lives. To each other and then to their respective spouses. So that's a very unusual situation. So they believe obviously in commitment, and they believe in following through with those commitments. So that's kind of the background of the family that I come from. So just very much, they both came up through the Depression. So they're both older. So they both went through a lot of adversity when they were young. My father and mother had 4 kids when they were in their early 20s. And my dad was working construction. So just kind of think about that. And that was in the 50s. So he wasn't making a whole lot of money. As a matter of fact, he shared with me that one day he was laying on the couch with his hand on his head going, "What have I done?" Because he wasn't certain how he's going to pay the bills. So, but that's just kind of the background that I come from. So
yeah, hard work is not always the answer, right?
No. And just to kind of piggyback on that that's how I was doing construction until 1997 and decided, you know what, I got to find a different thing to do so I can make a little bit more money. So that's how I got in the car business. So just a little background on me. So
do you feel your parents made a better choice the second time?
I was so young. I was so young. I mean, every child wants their parents to stay together. I mean, that's just inherent. Yeah. I mean, that's, when your parents are married, you want them together. And so there was a lot of just stuff that we went through, my dad said something, then I didn't speak to him for a year. And there was just a lot of family stuff.
A lot of pain.
A lot of pain that went on. So a lot of things that just between my parents that, just happened in the middle of a divorce, a lot of hurtful things and a lot of things that were said and a lot of things that were done. But believe it or not, over time, dad and his wife, Ruth, and mom and her husband, Paul, over time, we had family Christmases because we had a large family. My father had 2 kids with his current wife, my half brother, and then an adopted brother. So 8 of us total. So we all would get together at family Christmas over time, but it took time. That didn't happen overnight. I mean, at one point, they were trying to decide who was going to come to Christmas. So that's how it transformed over time. But it took some time. It took some time for hurt to heal and wounds to heal and that kind of thing. So
both camps are going to get together to celebrate Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We still do that actually. We still do that. So it's both camps. That's an interesting way to say it.
I mean, it shows incredible maturity, and I love stories like that.
Again, it took time. It wasn't initially that way. There was a lot of hurt that had to be overcome. And that says a lot for both my parents, that they were able to swallow, hurt on both sides. So that's, it says a lot about both of them. So
And you have how many siblings biological?
Oh my goodness. There's 8 of us total. So, from the first marriage, there's myself, and then I have 3 older brothers and two older sisters.
Okay.
And then from the second marriage, there are 2 brothers. My brother Mike was adopted, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. And then my brother Matt, is my half brother. But there's 8 of us total.
You still have good relationship with all of them, or?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We're a little different family. We don't talk all the time, but we'll reach out, text, every now and again, and it's just a little different dynamic, and but if one of us needs somebody, then we're there. I did lose my one of my middle brothers back in 2015. He passed away from a massive heart attack, so he's in heaven, but everybody else is as healthy as they're going to be and can be at this point in time. So
That's great. That's great. Well, Will, tell me about your first conscious moment that you remember as a kid. Like, when did you realize? What's your first memory, the foundation of your childhood?
oh my gosh.
When
Well,
did
and
you?
I forgot to mention where I was born too, Wilmington, Ohio. So
Yeah.
you had said that. So, and I forgot to mention that I was born in Wilmington, Ohio, which is a small town in central Ohio, in Clinton County Memorial Hospital. My first conscious moment, a basketball hoop being nailed to the front porch of the house I was in when I was 4 years old. That was just high enough for me to throw the basketball in, I think, is probably one of my first conscious moments.
Did you lower
Um,
it so you can dunk?
no, this was, I won't say the year, but this was a while ago, brother. it was, I don't know why it was set that low, to be honest with you. We all were kind of sports minded kids. We all played, basketball and, baseball and football, and we all were involved with sports. So, I mean, it was just kind of a thing. But for whatever reason, Dad I don't know if he put it there for me or had put it there for the boys, and whatever, it's hard to say, but I just remember that.
That was your first conscious moment, huh? And how old were you back then? Do you remember?
4, I think, 3 or 4, something like that. Another moment was I fell down our basement steps. I do remember that. I was like 3. I took a headlong tumbled down some stone steps that we had in the basement. Thankfully, that's probably what's wrong with me.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
What about the highlight of your childhood? Maybe the moment where you experienced the biggest joy during your childhood
Oh my goodness.
when
The
you were
biggest
under 10.
joy. I know you're asking me this question, and after everything I've been through, it's a hard one to kind of sort through. Biggest joy. Um, I don't know. Christmases, probably, when we were all together. When the whole family was together. As a kid, I think was probably my biggest joy is when we were all in one spot. And I'm talking before the divorce, when I was young, like 6, 7 years old, and we'd have like all the kids, and a couple of the older ones were married, so they'd bring their kids, and we'd all be together. So I think that's probably, those times were probably my most joyous times when I was a kid.
Christmas just brings different energy, doesn't it? Like,
Hmm.
naturally, people are kinder, and it's just you can feel the love in the air. That's why so many people are in love with Christmas, and they start preparing from September.
I always give my wife a hard time as a bah humbug, but that's there's some deep seated Christmas memories there. So I'm not as bah humbug as I like to act. So
Yeah, Christmas is a special time. I remember that, for me, it's I'm not extreme like my sister. She starts preparing in November, but to me, I remember my boss used to say he wasn't big on holidays. He was like, "Come on, just let's do the job, and it's
right,
another day." So
right.
for 10 years, I didn't celebrate holidays. I was just boom, boom, work, 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 and so holidays just don't feel the same as to some other people.
Hmm. I,
More of
I understand. Believe me, I get
a day, and I need to slow myself down and just make sure, because lovely wife loves the holidays, and I need to be more present and need to work on that.
I think our wives are related because mine does too. So she is a big holiday person. So she loves Christmas, Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
loves all the decorations and all that stuff, and tries to get me all excited about decorating. And I'm just not that
yeah.
guy.
It's like, oh, let's just go back to work, please.
Well, it's not even about work. It's just she like, so in Texas they have gates. Everybody has a gate, seems like, and so she wants to decorate the gate
Mm.
to our house, and I'm just like, I'm not feeling that. Sorry. She wants to put up lights and all this stuff, and I'm just not feeling the whole decorating the gate thing. But we'll see. We'll see. You got to make your wife happy as best you can. So
Yeah, I wonder where that comes from, that special mood, because some people hold on to Christmas because of kind of memories like yours. Like this was the moment that brought you the most joy, and people look forward to those moments because naturally the mood comes and things get fixed on their own, and you can just shut down the world. Everybody gets a pass to focus on the holidays. And some people don't have good memories from holidays, like people that associate them with scandals and with
right.
lack of gifts and poor holidays, and they just want to move forward. And but I think we all need to be a little bit more present during the holidays. It's the right thing to do,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
understand why we celebrate them. So Christmas is a special day. But moving on from the holidays,
There
tell
we
me
go.
tell me about
Moving on to work.
moving on to work. Tell me about your highlight during your teenage years. Like, how were you in high school? Were you a rebel? Were you a good kid? What?
Oh gosh. I had my moments. I was it was funny, up until, in early high school years, I was kind of I wasn't as athletic as some. I was more athletic than most. I was kind of a bully, believe it or not, because I was very insecure. So I was bigger, but I was weak. And so, so I would try to, impose my will on people, and I got picked on a lot because I was mouthy, but I couldn't back it up. And I was just that guy. And, so I got beat up a lot when I was young, believe it or not. And then I got into high school, like I'm talking like that was, kind of junior high into early high school, freshman, sophomore. And then, so when I got into like regular high school, junior, senior years, I had focused more on basketball and focused more on, kind of what I was going to do when I was getting out of school. I was called to be a pastor when I was 16 years old, and
Oh,
kind of ran like a scalded dog when I was, 19, 20 years old. But that's a whole nother story. But in the meantime, basketball was probably my biggest focus when I was in early, middle high school. I played a lot of basketball, and actually got a scholarship to a Division III college to play for them, Mount Vernon Nazarene College in Ohio, and I played a year for them. So I mean, I was pretty focused on that, pretty focused on basketball, and pretty focused on, and actually went to Mount Vernon Nazarene to kind of be get my degree and be a pastor. And like I said, there was a situation there where I was helping with a church, and I went to the youth pastor and said, "Hey, what do I got to do to be the best youth pastor that I can be?" And his answers were not what I was expecting.
mm,
Sometimes you go to a mentor and you say, "Hey, what is it that I got to do so I can be better?"
right.
And then you're looking for, steps to be better. And sometimes they don't give you those steps to be better, or they give you the things that might cause you not to want to do it. And that's what happened with me.
Oh,
He said things like, "Well, your congregation will never trust you."
now
And, I'm a 19-year-old kid, or an 18, 19-year-old kid. And he's sitting here telling me the people I'm going to serve are never going to trust me.
yeah,
I'm sitting here going, well, why would I want to do that? If they're never going to trust me, why in the world would I ever want to, why would I ever want to mess with it? So I just, some of the answers that he gave me, and he was trying to help, but I don't think he realized who he had.
yeah.
I was a immature, I was a teenage kid, teenage boy. So, I mean, I was pretty immature, and, especially me back then. I was extremely immature. So, he's sitting there telling me this stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to get messed up with that stuff. So, I went the other direction and kind of started doing my own thing and focusing on other things. And my father pulled me aside and said, "Hey, if you're going to be a pastor, you need to either quit what you're doing, or you need to go back to school and focus on a different major, or you need to get a job and get a car." Well, he said, "Get a job and get a car." And all I heard was "get a car." So it's the truth. All I heard, that was the level of maturity back then, is all I heard was "get a car." Oh, I get a car, freedom,
Yeah.
Freedom. That's all I heard was freedom. So, hey, let's get a job and get a car. So that's what I did. And it just kind of went downhill from there. I turned my back on God for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was gonna
20
say,
years.
you've been walking with God. What made you turn? Do you think that this moment with that person that didn't really encourage you, but instead created doubt, do you think that was one of the reasons?
There was a lot of reasons. So, and I'm not going to say my age on here because I love to say this because my wife will shoot me, but but I will say in the 80s, in the church world, grace was not talked about.
Mm,
There was not a whole lot of discussion about grace. It was more about salvation and then the rules that you had to follow in order to be saved.
yeah.
And we know that you can't do anything to enhance your salvation. Okay.
Right.
It doesn't matter the rules you follow. You're no more saved if you follow rules or if you don't follow rules, because Jesus did the finished work on the cross. That's what saves you. It's not what you do, it's what's in your heart. Because the whole thing is the Holy Spirit changes you from the inside out. So he takes away those desires to do the things you used to do and puts new desires in your heart.
Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to work. And if you do mess up, then you fess up, and that's grace. That's what grace is all about. Well, nobody explained that to me. All they said was, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to dress this way, you got to look this way, you got to talk this way, you got to be this way, you got, all these things that I had to do. And I tried to do them the best I could, but then I was missing the whole forgiveness piece if I messed up.
Yeah.
And so at some point I'm an all in or all out type of guy. That's kind of who I am.
Yeah.
So I was either all in or all out, and I couldn't be all in. So I was all out.
Yeah.
So I just went the other way. So that, to answer your question, it wasn't necessarily that one thing. It was a bunch of things. And that's what caused me to kind of go the other direction.
Well, a
And
lot of people think that blasphemy is to say, "Oh, gee, oh God," to just use His name in vain. But it doesn't mean that. It means exactly what you're explaining: the religious spirit to build wrong perception of what God is. So if you don't know God, it's really hard to follow Him, and especially if you think that you have to work for your salvation, like a lot of religions believe that, and sacrifice is easy, obedience is hard. So everybody's ready to sacrifice and work hard and have no hope. That's why so many people run away from God, but that's not who He is. And I'm glad that you were able to be found again. Tell me a little bit about your development after that period, like after 20. How you said everything started to go downhill, and you were away from God for 20 years.
oh
You
wow,
probably went to look for artificial love, like most of us do.
I
And
was a car guy, dude. So that should pretty much sum it up. If you have, I was your quintessential hard charging car guy. So I mean, I worked hard and I played hard, and that was what I did. I mean, I started in 1997, and I get off of work and I go to the bar. I mean, that's what you did. You go to the bar, go to strip clubs, go to the, go to all those things. And I wasn't one of the ones that would cheat people. That's not what I'm talking about when I say I was a quintessential car guy. What I meant was, I worked really hard. So I sold a lot of cars and tried to make as much money as I could. But then instead of trying to, set that money aside and do what I needed to do when I needed to do it, I was too busy spending it. So I had to make more.
right,
So I was too busy going out and blowing it on stuff that didn't mean anything, women and cars and shoes and clothes and all that stuff, all those, material things, it didn't matter or make a difference. And in the meantime, I had 3 kids, and, at one point got custody of my kids. And so I'm still trying to live this lifestyle and not, and there was a couple of times I tried to come back to God and try to get back with him, but there wasn't a real commitment there. And there wasn't a real, spiritual moment. There wasn't a real moment where he, more of me trying to get to him and not really making a commitment to do it. It was kind of just out of duty and not out of love and relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people do, is they think, well, duty is going to get me where I need to be. And duty will only take you so far. And then you fall away, but when it's relational and not transactional, that's where the moment happens.
Yeah.
When it's a relational thing where God says, look, you're my child and I want you with me. And you feel that tweak of the Holy Spirit, that conviction in your heart that says, oh, by the way, yes, he does want me. I don't have to earn it. He does want me. He gave his son for me. And this is what it's about. And this is the grace and the mercy that you get to receive. That's when the moment happens. And that's what happened for me. And there was a lot of things that led up to that. I almost, I got married for the last time and, almost messed that one up in 2008. We were only been married a couple of years, and we were apart because of a financial situation and a job. I was in another state and almost messed it up and almost got divorced again for the 4th time.
Oh.
Yeah, I've been married 3 times. I've been married 4 times.
Let's go back to the first time. Let's go your first wife. How did you meet her? Tell us about your first wife.
Well, that my first wife was the mother of my children, all 3. That was my daughter describes it as a toxic relationship. We met when she was 17 and I was 20. I fell head over heels madly in love with her. Couldn't tell me anything wrong about her. I was just smitten. And the problem with that was she took full advantage of it. And she, at some point, became addicted to pills. She'd gotten into an accident when she was young and got addicted to OxyContin and oxycodone and Neurontin. And, so she was a pretty big pill addict. And this all happened while we had split. We would split up, get back together, split up, get back together, split up, get back together. We did that as a boyfriend and a girlfriend. Then we did it as married couple. Tried to take her down to Virginia with me when I was in the military, and that didn't work out. And she left me and wanted me to, get out of the military, and I wouldn't do it. And, so it was just there's a lot of toxicity there, that just back and forth. And then we had my son together. She was a 17-year-old getting ready to graduate from high school, turning 18, holding my son on her hip. And I had just turned 21. And, so she had my son while she was still in high school. And I was willing and ready to take responsibility and to be there for him and be there for her. And so that's why I went in the Army. And, and then she didn't want to come. She didn't like being away from her family. And I'm giving you like the super Cliff Notes version. We'd be here for 3 hours if I told you everything that happened in this relation, at least that long, probably longer than that. But it just was never good. It was just, I'm not saying it wasn't good moments. I'm just saying there was just so much stuff. And so she got pregnant with my daughter while she was we were in Virginia. She got pregnant with her while she was down there, and leaving me while she was pregnant, going back to Ohio because she was homesick, taking my son. So left me down there in the military by myself and was trying to get me to get out, and I wouldn't get out. So we ended up divorcing. Then she talked me into coming back. In the meantime, got pregnant with my youngest daughter again, and then found out that she was on drugs at that moment in time. So she was taking drugs while she was pregnant with my youngest. And she ended up having her. And then I found out, I didn't know she was on drugs when she was pregnant with my youngest. I found out, believe it or not, on my day off, I found a pill bottle with my name on it. And I wasn't taking pills. And so I did some investigating and found out she had gotten like 1,900 pills in a 4 or 5 month period. And she had been on probation and parole and all this other stuff. I mean, it's a story, brother. I'm telling you. But she ended up going to prison, and I ended up getting custody of my kids. So my youngest was 10 months old, my middle daughter was 5, and my son was 9 when I got custody of them, and I was in the car business.
Just trying to follow the timeline. At 19, this pastor told you that your congregation is not going to trust you. Then
Right.
you suggested you need to make some different turns in your life.
Right.
And you got into car business at that point, or no?
No, I didn't get in the car. I didn't get in the car business till I was 27.
You met her, and
I met her,
and you thought that the responsible thing is to go to the army, to go to
correct. Yep.
Probably looking for leadership, looking for direction, looking for discipline, because you subconsciously felt that you need someone to lead you. Maybe
can I interrupt you and be honest? I was looking for a paycheck.
Paycheck.
I was looking for a paycheck. I wanted a steady.
You can get a paycheck from anywhere. Why?
Right, but back then it was I needed steady, income and steady healthcare and steady.
Gotcha.
So it was all about, when I say paycheck, I meant steady with a future that could make us stable. I was looking for stability is what I was looking for, and structure, not necessarily discipline, but stability and structure. And I wanted stability and structure for her too. So it was about us getting together in a stable and structured way. And so when I went into the military, and what's funny is when I was in basic, that was when I was my happiest. When I was like, people were screaming at me and telling me where to be and what to do and how to do it. And I, believe it or not, I was in heaven, because once I had that structure and that discipline in place, oh buddy, I mean, we were firing on all cylinders. But what had happened was is I got into we got into, garrison, which is where you go and live in the barracks and do your daily day-to-day job. Well, they're not screaming at you day to day. You're doing your job day to day. And, and then you have free time from like 4:30 on Friday afternoon until Monday morning at 5:30 in the morning. You got all this time. So you can go out and party and do whatever it is that you want to do. But you got to be back there at 5:30 in the morning or 4:30 in the morning, or whenever you got to show up for formation on Monday morning. That's when you got to be there. Well, of course, you got 20-something year old kids, and we're all drinking like fish and running around and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And, I started drinking when I was, alcohol was my drug of choice. So I was a pretty heavy drinker when I was young, and up until 13 years ago, I was a pretty heavy drinker. And so in the military, it was just that way. For 4 years I did that, and she taught me into getting out and coming home. So I did. And there's there's another story behind that too. So the timeline, just to give you an idea what the timeline was, is that happened with my dad and the guy, and I got into the military because I needed a paycheck, because I wanted to take care of my girlfriend. We weren't married yet, and my son. And then I ended up coming home, getting married, taking her down there with me. It didn't work. She came back. We got divorced. We filed for divorce. I stayed down there in Virginia, and down there is Newport News, Virginia. Ended up meeting another woman down there. We ended up getting married. That marriage didn't last 6-8 months. I was just too immature and too my mind was too wrapped up in my kids that were in Ohio, and I was in Virginia, and it just was not going to work. Yeah. So I left her, went back to Ohio, got with my former wife, found out she was an addict. She ended up going to prison. I ended up.
What did you go for?
Drugs. She went to prison for drugs.
Oh, she just got caught with a bunch of pills?
So she was doctor shopping. So basically what happened was, when I talked about, me finding out about the pills, I went to different pharmacies. She was going to 5, 6, 7 pharmacies and getting pills. and basically giving them names of people that supposedly they were for when they were all for her. So she was doctor shopping. So I would basically went behind her and found all these different pharmacies that she was going to and getting these pills from. What's funny is the police were doing the same thing, but they were showing up right after me. I started in a different town and headed back to where we lived instead of starting where we lived. Otherwise, I would have been running into the police as I went. So I was going to I started at a different town outside of where we lived and came back to the town we lived in. The last pharmacy I went to, they wouldn't give me any information because the police had already been there.
But did she get caught because there was intent for her to sell them?
She got caught because I turned her in. That's why she got caught. I went to her parole officer because I was very, for lack of a better way of saying this, I was a very self-righteous person back then. So she was stealing from me and lying to me and lying to her kids and so instead of thinking, well, I need to get her help, my first thought was I need to turn her in. And so that's what I did. So I took everything to her parole officer and said, hey, this is what's going on. She would have gotten caught anyway.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of because I turned, so everything I got, I gave to her parole officer, and she looked at me and goes, how did you get this? And I said, well, I went around to all these. She goes, oh my gosh, this is crazy. She goes, well, just so you know, it's fine that you did this, but there's the Drug Enforcement Task Force was doing the same thing that you're doing. And it was just a matter of time. She goes, I'm glad you brought this to me, because if you had not, they would be arresting you along with her. So really what I did is I kept myself from prosecution, because they basically thought we were both doing it, living in the same house. But because I went to her myself and showed her what she was doing and giving it to her, I basically kept myself from going to jail.
Well, someone's got to take care of the kids.
Because I wasn't, like I said, alcohol was my drug of choice. I did not want anything to do with pills, didn't want anything to do with Coke, even when I got into the car business. I mean, drugs was just not there was a lot of guys that were doing drugs, tons of it, cocaine, pills, you name it. I just was never about that. I just always wanted to drink. Let's go drink. Yeah. Let's go have a beer, which was turned into a case. But that's what we always, let's go have a beer. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it was never a beer. Never one time was it a beer. It was a minimum of 3. And usually it was multiple. So it was never a beer.
So these drugs were popular back in the 80s, huh? The pills?
Well, I wasn't in the business in the 80s, but I mean, I worked, the pills kind of never went away.
Because right now it's really bad.
Late 90s, mid 2000s, the pills were ridiculous. I mean, there was guys that were going out and sleeping in the cars because they were taking pills.
Right now it's really bad.
Drugs. Well, the drug of choice right now is heroin and fentanyl. Now, I don't know what it's like. I haven't been in the dealerships as of late. I mean, I go into them to do what I do for Ascent Dealer Services, but I'm not like standing in franchise dealerships like I was when I was, working. But, I know that, drugs were pretty popular back when I was working in the, 3 years ago. I mean, it was still a problem.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm not talking about dealerships, but just in general, because I believe that hate is not the opposite of love, because to hate something, you must love the opposite. So
right.
Indifference is the opposite of love. When you want to experience feelings, but you can't. And I think that's what those painkillers do. They just shut down all of the emotions, all of the pain, and they make you indifferent. And those are the worst. Like when I got into an accident a few days ago, and they wanted to give me painkillers, and I was like, no, thank you. I don't take anything, even if it's over the counter, because I'm so afraid of that. On my honeymoon, I had an ear infection, and they gave me some strong painkillers because I was in real pain. And I'm like, wow, this is so easy to get hooked on. So yes. I really want to stay away from all of these painkillers, because that's the real hell, when you can't really experience love or any other emotion.
True.
So, and alcohol is a different drug. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about alcohol, how it helps you calculate risk, and it just gives you that makes you brave, makes you
10 foot tall and bulletproof. That's what I used to say. I
right.
was 10 foot tall
But
and bulletproof. Yep.
it's really bad because it's so socially acceptable,
Hmm.
and everyone accepts it like it's not a big deal. Sometimes you feel obligated to do it socially, and I don't think anything has killed more marriages, more friendships, more lives than alcohol. It's probably one of the worst.
Yeah, I was something to behold. It was bad. It was really bad. I was not I was not an ugly. I was a mean drunk, but I could be. And the thing of me is I didn't want to. I did not like this. You know, I was a very prideful person, and it's something that I really work on because it's easy to fall back into that.
Yeah.
And so I was a very prideful person. So I didn't like to. I hated being sloppy. I did not like being a sloppy drunk. I was the guy that wanted to keep the buzz going without getting like
Mhm.
all. I just didn't like that. So, so I would like, stop drinking and start drinking soda and to keep the buzz at a level that wasn't stupid. But, when you're trying to do that, I mean, you're kidding yourself because at some point it's going to happen. And
Yeah.
it did. And, and so people would say something and it would upset me and I would get upset and act like an idiot. And, it's just a vicious circle.
Yeah.
You're kidding yourself when you think that, yeah, I can control this when you're drinking the way I drank. You can't, and you aren't. You're not controlling anything. It's controlling you, and that's what it did. Now what I will say is by the grace of God, I was a psychological drunk. I was not a physical drunk
Mhm.
because at some point, if you do it long enough, which I thought I had, and I was very blessed and fortunate that I hadn't. At some point, your body requires it
Yeah.
and even if you quit you still have physical issues, and for whatever reason I quit and basically quit cold turkey, and I didn't have any physical issues from withdrawal or anything like that. I had more trouble quitting smoking than I did drinking, to be honest with you.
Yeah. They say that some people that are really really into it, like when they're at the latest stage, they could die if they stop.
Yeah, I was very fortunate and blessed that I didn't go
Yeah.
through any of that, and but I'm telling you, smoking, I had a hard time. I quit cold turkey smoking, and I had a harder time quitting smoking than I did drinking. It was tough.
Well, maybe because who knows why. But I don't judge people that choose to drink. I don't drink, and it's not because I had really bad problems, but I just don't see any benefits. And I've had some, in the past, every embarrassing moment in my life was based on alcohol. There was always alcohol involved.
Absolutely. I have a lot of those.
I just don't associate it with anything positive. A lot of people are like, well, it made me. I don't.
Can't think of a single good thing that came out of me drinking, and I've
Right.
said that many times. So yeah,
Same here. So I don't see any benefits. Anything that doesn't serve me, I try to drop it. And now when I observe friends that are drinking, you can see the stages on the first drink,
hmm
the second drink, the third drink, and the fourth drink, and how they give up control and how the spirit takes over. And it's so fascinating to watch, to see a strong, powerful man becoming something completely different after 4 or 5 drinks, and just going against their values, going against their principles, going against their character. And it's like they're being, possessed by a spirit. So it's a scary thing to observe, especially
right,
when you don't drink it, and it's easier to reaffirm your decision and your choice. Be like, man, good. Like recently, I was at a party, and it was like a kids' party, and we left. I went to drop off my kids, and then we were going to continue with just adults. And by the time I came back, some of the parents were getting into fist fights, and I'm like,
oh my
whoa.
gosh,
But
wow,
I've noticed them getting drunk, just drinking a little too fast, and I watched the stages, and I'm like, maybe it's not a good idea to come back. But as soon as I came back, it was like, whoa, what happened here? And I'm like, look, man, this is like so terrible, ruining the kids' party, because of this. And,
right,
and they were both, good guys, but acting out of character. because of this. And
Well, it changes your mental state. And again, I don't sit in back and, point fingers at people that drink. I
right,
choose
yeah,
not to
not just
because of what it's done in my life. And
yeah,
if anybody wants to ask, hey, if anybody wants to have a conversation about it, I'm willing to have that conversation. Just like if we want to know about, losing a child or anything that affected me negatively as a younger person, I'm going to sit and have a conversation with somebody because I want them to avoid the traps and avoid the things that I went through so that they can have a better life. Because, my father always told me, well, you got to learn things the hard way. I don't understand why, but you do. So
yeah,
I've learned everything by, hey, let me go out and mess this thing up and I'll see if I can make it right. So, so, so if I can help somebody that's, decides to go out and, drink till they get hammered and go out and do something stupid, if I can help them from not doing that anymore, by all means. If something that I've been through and dealt with can help somebody from, avoiding going out and doing it, by all means, I'm happy to share it and happy to talk about it. So that's kind
yeah.
of, kind of the deal.
I think it's wise to learn from other people's experience, especially when there's pattern of people losing their marriages, their children, their life, thanks to that. So it's smart. I try to tell because I'm just like you. I had to experience everything and learn everything the hard way. Now I'm becoming a little bit wiser, and I try to teach my daughter that you don't have to get dirty. You can just watch, observe. You don't have to go into the mud. It's not,
Right.
and learn from other people's example or warnings. So I got the part about the first and the second wife. Second wife was more of a physical attraction, fling. The third wife, how did
That
you?
was me trying to rekindle a high school
Oh,
flame that was not, yeah. That was not, that was me trying to force something into a relationship that wasn't there. It was a mistake. My first three marriages didn't last, and I'm talking like time, not even time together. I'm just talking total time. My first three marriages didn't last 4.5 years
uh,
total.
wow.
Yeah. So
So
it was
just had,
lack of leadership as a man on my part. There was no biblical leadership as a man, and it was me not, just, getting hurt because, well, I can't be with her. She hurt me, and it's just, and that's not marriage. That's playing house. Let's be honest. Let's be real. That's not marriage.
yeah.
And so, instead of being a man and taking responsibility for my actions and taking responsibility for what I was doing and I was putting all the blame on them
Mhm.
and never, sitting down with them and saying, hey, we need to work this out, or we need to work on this, and I need to work on this, and could you work on this, and communicating and talking and doing all those things you're supposed to do so that your marriage will work. I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
So what I like to tell people is that I chose the first three and God chose the last one. And I almost messed that one up. So I almost screwed that one up because of my lack of commitment and leadership as a man, in our relationship. And so, so fast forward, God causes me to lose my job, makes me go to Iowa. I go to Iowa. My wife reluctantly, by faith in God, comes and follows me, but says, hey, by the way, you have to go to church. I hadn't been in church in 20 years.
Mm,
I hadn't been in a, not to really go. I'm not saying I hadn't went just because it was going to benefit me in some way, but just to go. I hadn't been church in 20 years.
so that was her condition, huh?
So let's put it this way. I was doing some things that by all intents and purposes, she should have just told me to go pound sand, and she didn't. We were on the phone. She said it very plainly and succinctly. I will move to Iowa with you. I do not trust you, not one little bit. I don't trust you as far as I could throw you. My wife's 5'4", so that gives you. I'm 6'5" and she's 5'4". She goes, I don't trust you as far as I could throw you. Okay, but I trust God. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come to Iowa. The only condition, this was the only condition she put on her coming, is that you come to church. I'm moving 600 and some odd miles away from my home. I go to church. I expect my husband to come to church. If you come, we're good. If you don't, we're done.
Mm, that's good.
And guess what? I could have said no because I hadn't been in a church in 20 years. And because I wanted to save my marriage and wanted my wife, I said yes.
Good.
And then from there, God and the Holy Spirit went to work on my heart. It took a few weeks to get it started because, you know, she poor Julie, she'd been in the same church for 20 years. And so she moves to a different state. And the first church we went to, she didn't make it 5 minutes. We had to leave because she was homesick. And it wasn't quite like the church that she used to go to. So then we go to a different church that was like the church she used to go to. And it was worse because then she was really homesick. So we weren't there 2 minutes and we left. So for the first 2 Sundays, I didn't even get through church. I was like, this is easy. I'll go home, drink beer, watch football. I'm telling you the truth. And so the third Sunday, she goes, well, we'll go back to the first church because that's what the one that you and the girls like. So we'll go back to that one. She goes, we can get through the first 10 minutes, then we'll be good. So we did. They had a guest speaker that Sunday. Nothing happened. But then the next Sunday, we sat all the way in the back. The pastor started preaching a series on following your calling. And that's when it started. And I started crying a little bit. And Julie looks over at me and goes, you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I don't know what's going on. Something my eyes water, and I don't know. And so the next Sunday we moved a little closer because if we'd have sat any further in the back, we'd have been out in the atrium because that's how far back in the back we were. So we move up a little closer the next Sunday, and then the Sunday after that we move up a little closer. And then about 6 weeks in, we're 2 rows from the front, and I'm bawling like a baby, snot, the whole 9 yards. I'm just bawling. And she's looking at me like I'm out of my mind because you're talking about this big giant car guy that's been, that cusses like a sailor, smokes like a chimney, drinks like a fish, does all these different things. And he's sitting here in church bawling like a baby. Yeah, and my wife's looking at me going, what is wrong with you? And I said, I don't know, but I am tired of fighting this. I'm back. I'm giving my heart back to Jesus and I'm done. I'm not fighting this anymore. So that's what happened. So here I am.
You were trying to fill a bottomless hole and could only be filled by him. So at this point, you have custody of your kids. You take care of your kids full time. All 3 of them are living with you. She becomes their stepmom.
There's a whole. We don't have enough time to go back to. Yeah, there's a lot that happened between then and then, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
How did the kids cope from all this?
Well, Brock was a drug addict at 14. Got hooked on drugs. His mother hooked him on drugs when he was 14 years old. The girls, Maddie retreated into books. Marissa and I didn't have a very good relationship. It was a terrible relationship. So kind of give you a background on my 2 older kids versus my youngest. My 2 older ones kind of grew up with their mother when they were young. So they Shannon had custody of them. That's her name. And so they lived with her for the majority of their young lives until I got custody. So Marissa was 5, almost 6. Brock was 9, almost 10. So for that amount of time, they both lived with her. Okay. So Maddie was a product of us getting back together the last time, my youngest daughter.
Yeah.
So she was 10 months old when I got custody of her. So the only parent she knew was me. Mm. And then my wife, when whatever girl I was seeing at the time, but when I got with my wife, that was her mother, because she never met Shannon. Shannon went to prison when she was, we tried to have, visitations and all that stuff. And that's a whole nother story, but Shannon could not follow the rules that the courts put out for her. So she couldn't keep a job. She couldn't keep a driver's license. She couldn't keep her address up to date with a parole officer. So they got tired of fooling with her and they sent her back to prison to finish out her sentence. So she was gone for 3.5, almost 4 years in prison. And then she got out, got rehooked on drugs, graduated to heroin, and, just kind of went bad from there. My kids have been through a lot. My kids have been through a ton, a lot of back and forth with me and my former wife, a lot of just hurt and a lot of really bad stuff. So my kids have been through just a ton of stuff. So my middle daughter and I didn't have a very good relationship because she was so stuck in wanting her mother to come and save her from me. So she and I are just now, since Brock has passed. It started before Brock passed, but since Brock's passed and Shannon had passed back in, 13, I think. Marissa and I have started mending our relationship. So we are a lot closer now than we've ever been. Maddie and I's relationship has always been good. That's my baby. She literally just got married.
God bless.
Yeah. So she's, her and our relationship has always been good. But the other two were so my whole point to telling you this, Brock and Marissa were kind of, because of the way the situation was with me moving in with my dad and them me getting custody, they were always kind of back to back, them against the world.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And Maddie was always kind of on the outside because she was so much younger and didn't grow up with Shannon as her mom. So they kind of alienated her a little bit when she was young. And so, when Brock passed, that was a big deal with Marissa. Marissa's still dealing with that. And, Maddie's, it's hit Maddie hard too. I mean, it's hit both of them hard, the Brock passing away. It's hit our whole family hard, but that's kind of the background of the effect of Shannon not being in their lives. It was, there was just a lot of stuff. Shannon and the drugs and she just never got clean, could never keep on a path of cleanliness from drugs, could never stay, on a program or anything like that. She just couldn't. I don't know. She graduated heroin somewhere in the 2012 range. And that's actually, we're pretty certain that she died on a head-on collision on one of the busiest highways in Ohio, 2-lane highways in Ohio. And we're pretty certain she was stoned on heroin and crossed the center line and hit somebody head on.
That's very tough, brother. Did they ever blame you for?
Oh, all the time. Did my kids ever blame me? 100%.
So you dealt with a lot of guilt and a lot of.
The one thing about me back then is I was always trying to tell them the truth about their mother. I never I probably told them too much. Mm-hmm. I never tried to keep anything from them. I was very clear that she was a drug addict. I was very clear that she was on drugs and that I never had anything to do with the drugs. But of course, I'm drinking like a fish. So, I was an addict of my own right.
Yeah.
I just felt like I was justified because it was legal.
Right.
So that was like I said, I was a very self-righteous person. I had a very jacked code that I lived by back then. And so, I'm pounding my chest and telling them what a bad person their mother is as I'm sitting there getting drunk out of my mind. You know? So it was kind of, so I was living a double standard.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is, they didn't blame me for her being an addict. They blamed me for not being a good father. I mean, I just wasn't a good father. And so me and the older ones had conversations when I gave my heart back to Christ and well, we had conversations before then, but when I gave my heart back to Jesus, we had conversations and I apologized and I asked for their forgiveness and I told them I was sorry because I was a jerk.
Yeah.
I didn't treat him good and I wasn't there for him and I wasn't the father I should have been. So
it takes humility to see that, some people never end up turning it around, but you've become such a good man. And
I've got the Holy Spirit, brother. I don't know about the good man part. I just try to be faithful. That's all. I'll take that. I'll go with the faithful piece.
Rely on His mercy and grace. So tell us about Brock. He became an addict at 14. How did his life continue on?
So the thing about Brock is, he was a boy's boy. I mean, he would go out and do things and get hurt. And he was your typical boy. He would just, ride his bike and fall off and just go out and do just goofy stuff. The problem with him and I is he was strong-willed. I was strong-willed. I talk about it in the book, Father's Journey Through Darkness, Growth from the Loss of a Son. I talk about it in the beginning of the book. So he was living with me. I came home from work one day early. It was my early night. Walk in the door. I go downstairs. He was supposed to have cleaned his room and he didn't. And that just set me off. And so he comes home from school. I drag him downstairs, not physically, but tell him to come downstairs, and I start screaming at him about his room. And he starts, just giving me all kinds of excuses. And he was never dumb enough to cuss me, but, just giving me attitude about, on and on and on. And I was being overbearing because I was, there, he had cleaned it, but not to my standard. You know what I mean? So he had cleaned it to a 13-year-old boy's standard, not to a grown man's standard. So, kind of shoved stuff under stuff and didn't really, straighten up, you know what I'm saying? So I could have given him grace and just said, hey, just finish it up. And I didn't. I just lost my mind. And so he started getting really belligerent and ugly. And I could feel it coming up the back of my neck. And back then I wasn't walking with Jesus. So it was like, this is going to turn ugly and it may turn physical. And I was concerned I was going to go to jail because I was going to do something stupid. So I called his grandfather and said, hey, I said, so he's safe, I'm safe, everybody's safe, and nobody goes to jail. I said, would you come get him, please? Because it's not going, he's going out, he's doing dumb stuff. He needs somebody with more patience than I have at this moment. Could you come get him? That was the worst mistake I've ever made in my life, was doing that, because his grandfather was on pills too. That's actually what killed him.
That was his mom's dad?
His mom's stepfather.
Oh.
So it was his grandfather by marriage. He was married to her mother. Her mother had passed away from a heart attack. And so it was just him. And then at some point she got out of prison. She ended up moving back in with him. I should have went and got Brock at that moment. I didn't. Okay. So she comes back, starts living with him. And that's when she started having Brock run pills for her and got him hooked on pills. So, and I didn't know that. Grandpa ends up dying from cirrhosis of the liver from taking pills. He ends up dying. She goes to prison. So she's in prison. Grandpa dies. The uncle calls her brother. Hey, by the way, Brock needs to come home because this is all going on. I said, no problem. I'll come up and get him. I'm trying to remember the timeline here. In the meantime, a few days later, Brock calls me and says, hey, by the way, Dad, I got something to tell you. I said, what's that? He goes, well, my girlfriend. I said, she's pregnant. Well, of course, he runs with that. She really wasn't pregnant. He thought if she told me she was pregnant, because I was a big responsibility guy, I would preach that, So he thought if he told me she was pregnant, then I'd let him stay up there, that I'd let him move in with them and that he'd stay up there and then he could do whatever he wanted to do. And I said, no, I'm going to come get you. You're going to come with me. We'll figure out the logistics, however we got to do it. And we'll go from there. And so I went up and got him. They were actually getting ready to send him, because of what he was doing in school, they were getting ready to send him to juvenile detention. He actually had a court date, and because he was skipping school and doing some other stuff, and I'm sure there were drugs involved. And so I went up. His uncle told me about a court date that he had. So I went up to that court date and met with the prosecuting attorney. And she asked me what my intentions were. And I said, my intentions are to take him to live with me. That I'm going to take him down to Milford, Ohio is where I lived at the time. I'm going to take him down to Milford and put him in school, and he's going to live with me, and we're going to get things worked out. She said, well, if you do that, then I'll drop all the charges against him.
Good. But so since the room, you asked the grandpa to pick him up. So then he was with them, and then you came back to his life at that moment, what you're describing right now.
Right.
How long was that? How long did
2 years, I think. Yeah, he was 13, so he was just getting ready to turn 15.
And you still had the girls?
What's that?
You still had the girls with you?
The girls stayed with me, yeah. Yeah, the girls stayed with me.
He was just rebellious son and
extremely well, so I'm a especially back then, I was a very testosterone driven male. So I mean, when you're, there can only be one testosterone driven male in the house. And I was old school. So when you're mouthing off and being belligerent and being ugly and being disrespectful, that's not going to play out well with me. And especially back then. And it didn't. And I was afraid that I was going to do something I didn't think I had the self-control. Gotcha. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you what was my thought process back then.
In a way.
Hindsight's 20/20. I should have just sucked it up and been a man and not done that. But, I was just trying to protect myself and him physically. And so, that's why I made that decision, and I made it in anger. You should never make decisions in anger. I made that decision in anger.
Mhm.
And had I stopped and taken a deep breath and walked around the house 10 times, I probably would have not done that. But like I said, I made it out of anger. And, I let him go when the grandpa got there. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life, is that I let him go live with them. Because we found out later on that he was hooked on pills, and that he had a drug problem. And I found out, so Brock had an overdose in 2012, which I talk about in the book, which he almost died. And, his girlfriend at the time when he was in high school told me, that he got picked up from his graduation party and took all his graduation money and went and bought pills.
Wow.
So that's how bad it was. And I had no idea.
So when you took him from the courtroom, what year was that?
Oh gosh. Now I got to think. So that would have been,
How old was he?
14, 15, somewhere in there. So, I mean, he died when he was 29. So
You brought him to Ohio?
well, we were in Ohio. So he was in a town called Coldwater, Ohio, which is northwestern Ohio.
Huh?
And I was in Milford, Ohio, which is southern Ohio. So we were, I don't know, hour and a half away from one another.
You brought him to Milford, and you reestablished your relationship? You started fresh? Or it was still finished business?
It wasn't, it was, our relationship when he was young was never good. I mean, it was father, son. I had moments of, I love you, son, and kind of huggy, but there was always a tension there.
Mm-hmm.
There was always, because I wasn't, when you're not walking with Jesus and you're trying to, show the right kind of love, you can't. I mean, you just can't. And I just wasn't. I was more worried about work and more worried about prestige and more worried about, status and money. And I wasn't, I didn't leave work to go to ball games or plays or things like that. I told you I was a car guy.
Yeah.
And so, if there's customers there, then you're there. If you're got to stay late, you stay late. And once you stay late, they're already in bed. You're thinking, so I'll just go to the bar.
The car business and the alcohol were your God at that.
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. I was all about the almighty dollar. I didn't care, I mean, and I tell the story in 2008, Brock was living with me. This was right before he graduated. I'm staying in the house. I'm making, 2005, I'm making over 100 grand a year. I'm making 110, 115 grand a year. Back then that's like making $150, $160. And I'm standing there going, good to be the king. It's good to be the king. Now you got to remember, I gave my heart to Jesus when I was young. So, I'm standing in my house saying, I did this and it's good to be the king. How you think God felt about that? Yeah. In about 6 months, I lost it all. He took it all from me. But I'll show you the king, bub. I'll show you who the king is. He did.
Pride.
He did. Oh, pride, buddy. Yeah. Better check it before it wrecks you. I'm telling you, because it did me. We lost it all.
So he was with you.
He was with me. He graduated and had that party right before I went to Iowa, and he was gone. I didn't see him for 5 years.
Wow.
5 years.
So after the party, when he had the overdose, did you know he was having an overdose? Or
he didn't have an overdose then. His overdose occurred 5 years later. I didn't see Brock, the overdose that almost killed him. So literally, it was about 4.5. He ran away, joined the military. His mother did the same thing to him that she did to me, talked him into getting out. He went AWOL from the Army, had a lot of drug interactions in those time periods. At one point, he was in Florida with some cousins and was living in an apartment full of drugs. And his uncle went and got him and brought him back to Ohio. And so there's a lot of stuff in that time period that I didn't even know about. But on right before his 20, it would have been 12. So it would have been 20. Was he getting ready to turn 23, 22? No, it would have been 21. He was getting ready to turn 21 because I had him for 8 years and he died when he was 29. So he was getting ready to turn 21 years old. He was running around with his uncle, went and got pills from his mother, took a bunch of pills, went back to his uncle's house, went upstairs, went to bed, fell asleep. At some point in the middle of the night or during the night, he rolled over, threw up, aspirated, breathed it down his lungs, went without oxygen for an undetermined amount of time. My daughter found him and they put him in an ambulance and took him to the hospital. He should have been dead. He was a walking, talking miracle for 8 years. He should have been brain dead. He should have been a vegetable. He should not have lived for an additional 8 years. He should have been dead right then and there. He was not a Christian. He had not given his heart to Jesus. He was an atheist. And actually, when he got out of the hospital and went back to live with his uncle, much to our trepidation, I went to my daughter's graduation party because she was there. And he told me his God was the spaghetti God. He was trying to hurt my feelings, trying to hurt me because he knew I'd give my heart to Jesus, back to Jesus, and he was an atheist. And so he was making fun of me and wanted to hurt me.
So when did you get back together? So when he was 21, he got the overdose.
So we got back. So the plan was, I was in Iowa, they were in Ohio. The plan was Julie and I were going to come back to Ohio, and the original plan was he was going to move in with us after the overdose because he had to relearn how to walk, talk, the whole 9 yards. I mean, he was essentially, they showed me a CAT scan of his brain. He was brain dead. He shouldn't, that's what I mean. I mean, it was, there's no doubt in my mind. I asked questions of the doctors. I asked questions of how bad he was. I mean, I was that guy. I was like, so where are we at? They showed me the CAT scan. They showed me, anywhere that's white is dead. Anything that's gray is viable. So they showed me all this and I'm looking at it and I'm going, the spot where controlled his breathing was dead. The spot where he swallows was dead. All these different spots in his brain were dead. The frontal lobe that makes him who he is was white, stark white. I mean, it's just all these different things. And so, we're in Columbus, we're in the Ohio State Hospital, Ohio State Medical Center, and we're in the critical care unit. And if you walk into the courtyard, there's two big buildings on the side here, and then there's one in the center. And this critical care unit's at the top of the one in the center, and it's where they send people basically to die. They're not, if they send them there, they're not coming out. So and this happened in 2012. I gave my heart back to Jesus in 2010. So this is 2 years after I did that. I'm in this waiting room. They sent him there overnight. I'm in this waiting room. I'm sitting there and people are dropping dead left and right.
Wow.
Talking to people about Jesus and sharing with them and witnessing to them. And there are people dropping dead left and right. There are people dying every day that are in this unit. And what's happening is nurses are coming in and pulling them into a little waiting room into a little room next to the waiting room, a meeting room. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I don't ever want to go in that room. Well, of course, the day I thought that, the next day I went in that room. And they said, hey, by the way, Brock's not responding, so we need to put a plan together. What are we going to do? And I said, the problem is that he was intubated. He had a tube down his throat. And they were trying to get him to squeeze their finger and respond. And he wasn't doing it because he was gagging on this tube. I said, guys, he's not going to do anything you ask him to do until you get that tube out of his throat. They're like, what? He's uncomfortable. He's not going to do what you ask him to because he's uncomfortable.
Right.
Well, Mr. Ramsey, his throat doesn't have anything to do with his brain. I said, well, it does if you want him to do something and he doesn't want to do it because he's uncomfortable. I said, you got to get that tube out of his throat or he's not going to do anything you ask him to do. He just won't. I know my son. I know how I am. If I'm hurting, uncomfortable, whatever, and you ask me to do something, I'm telling you to pound sand. That's what he's doing without telling you.
Yeah.
He's not going to do anything you tell him to do until you get that out of there. So they put a plan together. They pulled the tube out of his throat, put a trach in, gave him a feeding tube. They said, okay, in 7 to 10 days, we're going to evaluate and look at it. And if he's not responding, then we need to make a decision. Okay. So, we break from the meeting. They try to put the trach in that day and they can't. He almost dies on the table twice. Got to remember, I just gave my heart back to Jesus 2 years before this, and I had been a heavy drinker. I knew he was an atheist. I knew he didn't believe in God. I knew all these things. And he almost died on the table. And I knew full well if he died, he'd go to hell. Knew it as sure as I was standing there. I knew it. And God's asking me, so if he dies, are you going to be all right with that? He dies, you still going to follow me? That was a conversation. I said, absolutely. I can't be responsible for him. All I can do is be responsible for me. So I'm going to pray that he doesn't, and I'm going to get everybody else on the planet to pray that he doesn't. And that's what we did. Every chance I got, I get somebody to pray over him. Every chance I could get, I get people to pray for him and pray over him.
So he survived that. God saved him.
And then after he survived it, a year later, he gave his heart to Christ.
Man, that's good.
So yeah. So so after that, after I came back to Ohio, after that situation, and he finally gave his heart to Jesus and came and lived with me because he was living with me. He was still struggling with drugs. He's still fighting drugs, but
You're still drinking?
our relationship started to be repaired.
And you were still drinking or not?
At that point, no, I had quit drinking completely in 2011.
And did he sober up or?
He struggled with drugs and alcohol until basically he would be clean for 6 months, 8 months, and then have a relapse. The longest he was ever clean was right before he died, which was over a year. But he struggled with drugs and alcohol from the time he was 14 till the time he died.
So he moved back with you. He got a job, I assume, did you help him get in the car business, or how did
well, he wasn't a fan of people. I think he would have been a very good salesperson, but that was just not who he was. And so he was more of a lot porter. He did the lot porter thing for a while and he was a, what do they call it? Undercoating tech. He did that for a while. Then he did some other blue collar jobs. The problem is that we let him live with us rent free. And, it wasn't a problem, but it was a problem. We let him live rent free, not pay any bills. And he'd go to church with us. That was the requirement, same requirement my wife had for me. Well, he gave his heart to Jesus, but the problem was he had that money so he could go out and do what he wanted to do. So he knew he couldn't bring drugs back into my house. So he'd go spend the night with people. He goes, hey, I'm gonna go spend the night at this guy's house. And I didn't put the two and two together. And then finally, so basically what got him clean for that year, he was living with me. Julie and I were sitting there watching television for the night. We were kind of, calming down for the night. He had gotten home late from work. He worked in construction. He was taking a shower. He's like, hey, I'm going to go to bed. And his bedroom was downstairs. He had a TV and bed, and it was in the basement. He goes, I'm going to go to bed. So we're sitting there watching television. All of a sudden, Julie looks at me. She goes, what's that noise? I said, what noise? I don't hear anything. She goes, pause the TV. What's that noise? So I pause it. I don't hear anything. She's like, well, she goes, why don't you go downstairs and check on him? I'm like, okay. So I get to the top of the steps. I said, Brock. And he didn't respond. So I go down a little bit. Well, I see him, and it looks like he's asleep on the couch on the love seat. I said, Brock. He still didn't respond. So I used my dad voice, which I won't do or I'll blow your ears out. And for all intents and purposes, every one of my kids, if I use my dad voice, they'll jump out of their skin. And he did not move a muscle. He didn't even flinch. And I knew there was a problem. And I said, call 911. She'd already called. I went down there. He was turning blue, was almost gray. So he basically overdosed in the basement of my house. He was dying. And it was by the grace of God. I put him on the floor, started pounding on his chest. And by the grace of God, he revived before they got there. They didn't have to Narcan him that time. But the police showed up. Ambulance showed up, took him to a local hospital. It was right up the road from our house. He had to spend 3 hours there because it was an overdose. They didn't press any charges, which was really kind of surprising. But I told him straight up, so you're going to rehab tomorrow. The minute you get home and you get some sleep, a little bit of sleep, I'm taking you to rehab. So I took him up to rehab and dropped him off, packed his stuff, dropped him off. Well, he wasn't there 2 days, and they kicked him out because he tried to go in with drugs or tried to go in stoned. So they kicked him out. He's sitting on the curb, calls me. I'm at work, still in the car business. I'm at work. And he said, so what are we going to do? I said, son, I have no idea what you're going to do. So what do you mean? Said, you brought drugs into my house. So you got to get clean. You got to get it figured out. I don't know what you're going to do. He mother effed me and hung up on me. Hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life is to not allow my son to come back to my home after I knew he was in trouble. I got a call 2 weeks later that he had overdosed again, almost died. They had to Narcan him 6 times. They got him into a halfway house or got him into a recovery. It's called called Hope House, actually, was the name of the recovery place in Middletown, Ohio. And he spent 6 months there, went to a halfway house in between, got clean again, got a job, ended up meeting a girl, relapsed again somewhere down the road, not quite certain when, but got clean again, ended up moving to Lancaster, Ohio, and ended up being with this girl in Lancaster. And that's where he was until the day he died. Had a little girl with her. I have 2 grandkids. I have a young grandson that's named after me. His name is William L. Ramsey III. And then I have a granddaughter named Emery. But I have two grandchildren from Brock. I don't get to see them as often as I would like. Obviously, I'm in Texas and they're in Ohio, but my grandson's getting ready to turn 7, and granddaughter's getting ready to turn 4.
So he moved, he got clean at some point. He got his life back together on his own, or
I don't know that he ever really got his life back together. He was always chasing something, and I don't quite understand. It was always love or acceptance or something. He was always chasing something. He just never felt like he deserved whatever it was he was getting. I mean, he was with this young lady, and she loved him very much, and he just never seemed like it was enough. And he just couldn't stay away from it. I don't know else how to describe it. It was the worst message I've ever gotten in my life. So,
yeah. So were you in his life before he passed?
So yeah, I mean, we would message. So from the initial overdose in 12, he had nerve damage in his ear, so he couldn't hear on the phone. So we would do a lot of messaging back and forth, a lot of Facebook messaging. He had some money issues, so he would never really could seem like he could keep a cell phone for any length of time. So we would do a lot of messaging through Facebook and send a lot of videos. I was there. My daughter and I drove up to Lancaster the day that his daughter was born. We stayed with him when we were there in the hospital with him and his girlfriend, and got to take pictures and spend time and so yeah, I mean, our relationship was much, much, much better. I'm not saying it was completely repaired, but it was much better right before he died. So yeah, he and I were getting close again. So yeah.
Eventually, you got the message from his wife?
Well, no, they weren't married. They were living together. It was February 11th, 2020. I got a Facebook message. I was at work. Actually, I tell this in the book, it was exactly the same time. I got a message in 2012 or a phone call from my daughter, and it was 2:00 Central Time, or 2:15, between 2:15 and 2:00 Central Time. And so I got the same kind of a message this time through Facebook Messenger. Robin said, "Could you call me?" And I called her, and she said, "Hey," she goes, "I talked to the police in Wapakoneta where he was at." And she goes, "They're doing an investigation. They won't tell me anything. Can you call them? I got the number. Can you call this cell phone number and find out what's going on? I haven't talked to Brock since 10 o'clock last night." So I called the police officer. I was at work, and instead of walking outside and talking on my phone, I went back and sat at my desk, which was the dumbest. I was a sales manager, and I went back and sat at the sales desk, which was the dumbest thing I could have ever done. But I went back and sat down and was talking to the police officer, and I said, "Hey," I said, "this is William Ramsey." I said, "I'm calling to check on my son." I said, "I don't know where he's at. Nobody's talked to him for a few hours." I said, "My understanding is you're doing an investigation. I'm an hour and a half away. I can't get there quickly. Can you tell me what's going on?" And the guy said, "Well, what was your name again?" So I gave him my name again. He goes, "Well, give me your address." So I gave him my address. He said, "Mr. Ramsey, I'm sorry to inform you that your son has passed." So yeah, so that was how that conversation went.
I'm so sorry, brother.
It's yeah, I fell to my knees and screamed. It's you hear it, and it takes a minute to process it, for it to hit you, and then when it does, it's like somebody just hits you with a sledgehammer. I don't even know how. I can't describe it in a way that can make anybody that hasn't experienced it understand. It just doesn't compute, and it doesn't make sense, and it will never make sense. And, you know, I just got my stuff and got in the car and drove home. I called my wife and called my daughter, and because they were both, Maddie was still living with us at the time. And I called my daughter and I said, I need you to come home. She goes, she was in Wright State. She was actually taking classes at Wright State at that time. And I said, I need you to come home. She goes, well, what's going on? I said, I can't tell you. You just need to get in the car and come home. Same thing with my wife. I said, she said, what's going on? I said, I'm not telling you until you get in the house, because I was afraid that they wouldn't make it. Something would happen to them, because I had to try and get myself home. I worked 20 miles from the house. And so I had to try and get myself home, and then, you know, make sure they got home. So my daughter got home first. She wasn't very far away, but she tried to get me to tell her, and I couldn't. I'm not telling you until your mom gets home. So they got home, and I told them, and it was those first few weeks were they're just like a blur. I don't remember a whole lot. Those first few weeks, I don't remember a whole lot of what happened or how it happened, or it was just very raw, just very, very, just a lot of raw emotion and a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and just.
There's nothing worse that a parent could experience.
There's nothing worse than anybody that can experience. It's the description. I've been through a lot of counseling and talked to a lot of people, and there's nothing that an adult can experience that matches losing a child. Nothing. There's no, because it's opposite of what's supposed to happen. You're not supposed to bury your children.
No.
And so opposite. So, and especially suicides and drug overdoses are considered, you know, and I'm not taking, please, when I say this, I'm not taking away anything from any other way, but sudden unexplainable loss of a child is, you know, it's one thing when they pass away due to an illness and it's over time, which is not good either.
Yeah.
At all. But when they're ripped from you at whatever age, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy the other way too, because I know a lady that I'm very close to that lost her daughter to cancer. She was 39 years old, and she wrote a book too, and it's an incredible book. And it was during COVID, so they were trying to tell her she couldn't see her daughter.
Oh man, that's
yeah. She saw her daughter.
That was the worst thing. That was the worst thing they were doing during COVID.
She saw her daughter. She said, yeah, there's no way on this planet you're keeping me out of this room or out of this hospital while my daughter's dying. Tina Kadish is her name. She's an awesome lady. But, you know, and believe me, not taking anything away from her experience, but when your child is ripped from you, it just, you know, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, it's a different dynamic. And you know, I've sat back and thought about, you know, well, would it have been better if I'd have been able to say goodbye, or been better? I don't know. I don't know.
I think, I mean,
I don't know that either way, you know, neither way is good. They're both bad.
It could be worse.
They're both bad.
To watch your child die for a long time. You know, it could be worse. To be hopeless, to have nothing you can do. But we just have to be so grateful for the time we have together.
I got 8 additional years, and was very, very, I'm very thankful for that, because he could have died in 2012, and I would have, you know, and he would have never got to know Jesus, and he would have never gotten baptized, and he would have never, you know, we would have never repaired our relationship, and it would have been a nightmare. And, you know, not saying that this wasn't a nightmare, it was, but, you know, at least, you know, he did give his heart to Christ. I got to see him baptized. Our relationship was being repaired. Things were getting better. You know, we were spending time together. We were seeing one another. We were, you know, I was going and spending time with his kids and spending time with him. That's probably the biggest thing that he doesn't get to see his kids grow up, and his kids don't get to know him. That's probably the biggest thing that hurts me now, is that they don't get him. You know, so I think that's probably the biggest thing.
You've been through so much pain.
A little bit, but my God is great. My God is good. My God is, you know, I tell people that he's allowed me to grow around the grief instead of the grief growing around me. And that's, you know, that's what I hang on to. Do I have bad days? Of course I have bad days. Do I have, you know, days where I'm afraid? Yeah, I have those too. But, you know, in the midst of it and everything that I've dealt with, God's been there 100% every day, every time.
Some people go through bad stuff, and your story is just it's a powerful story because you have hope, and we have to have hope. I think the church has failed us to talk about heaven. We don't talk about heaven enough, and I believe that he is at a better place now. He is.
Well, the thing of it is when you know, we had our launch service, and yes, I am going to plug my church, Hope City Church, Canyon Lake, Texas, 1700 Oblate Road. We just had our launch service last Sunday, and I preached on hope. And yes, heaven is hope, but our eternal hope is Jesus Christ. Because without Jesus Christ, you have no hope.
Right.
Your only hope is the wrath of God. That's it. That's your only hope. There's nothing to put your hope or place your hope in other than Jesus Christ. Because if you're not placing your hope in him, you got trouble. You got problems.
That's true.
You know, I don't care what anybody says. I've been on the other side, you know, from the time I was 19 to the time I was, you know, almost 40. I was on the other side. I was doing things and making money and partying and having a good time and doing all that stuff. And guess what? At the end of the day, when I'd go to bed at night and I was all alone and I'm laying there and I got no hope, I didn't think I had any hope. It's believe me, when you surrender and submit, those are two words that people hate: surrender and submit. When you surrender your life to Jesus Christ and submit your life to God, that's when hope comes in.
Yeah.
Because irregardless of what's happening around you, they are always there. The day that Brock died, I went home and I sat at this very desk that I'm sitting at right now. And I described this in the book. And the first thought came to my mind after, you know, Julie and I and Maddie had talked and we were all, you know, in separate rooms and we're all crying and we're all bawling. And the first thing that came into my mind, God watched his son die. That was the first thing that came to my mind. My Father God watched his son die, watched him die. He knows what you're feeling. And that was the first thing that came to my mind. If that doesn't give you hope that God knows how you feel when you're dealing with something like that, when you're dealing with that and going through that, if that doesn't give you hope, there's something wrong with you. I'm sorry, because that did me. You know, he knows. He watched him beaten. He watched him scourged. He watched him tortured. He watched him bleed out, broken. He watched all that. He watched it and allowed it to happen so that we could be saved, so that we could have a relationship with him, so that we could go to heaven, so we could worship him for eternity. That's what he did. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
It put me on my knees. When I found out my son died, it put me on my knees. I couldn't function. And our God did that for us so that we could spend eternity with him. That don't give you hope. I don't know what does. Sorry, I didn't mean to preach. Apologize.
No, don't apologize. Don't apologize. There's nothing you can do about the pain, I assume. The pain will always be there. But hope is so important.
Absolutely. The pain's always there. It gets dulled over time. The main thing is, you know, and I talked about this. So you were at the Car Church conference and I talked about FocusFoward. So, you know, you have to focus on what's in front of you. Focus forward on what's in front of you and what God has for you, and not long back over your shoulder at what's behind you, what you've lost and what you might have left behind. I'm not saying when I say that, I'm not saying to say, forget your loved one, forget, you know, the adversity you've been through, forget what it is that you dealt with, forget. That's not what that means. Okay. It's always there. It's always present. But in order to get through it, you have to move away from the moment.
Yeah.
You can't be stuck in the moment because the moment will kill you because you're not moving. You're stagnant. So you got to focus forward on the next step. You got to focus forward on the next move, the next movement, even if it's a half an inch. You know, my father and I back in the day, you know, when he was alive and he was helping me through the situation with my former wife and everything, he's like, we got to move that sled 1 inch at a time, son. You know, we got to take care of this situation that happened out of it, and this situation that happened out of it, and this situation happened out of it. So we're moving that, and he would actually do it. He would like act like he was picking it up and moving it. Got to move it 1 inch at a time. Today we moved it 1 inch. Tomorrow we'll move it another inch. You know, so that was what his, you know, because he was trying to get me to focus on, you know, what needed to be done instead of worrying about what was happening.
Yeah.
And that's what has to happen here. I'm not saying forget. You're never going to forget. I'm never going to forget my son. Never going to forget Brock. Never going to forget what happened. But I can't stay. If I stay stuck on February 11th, 2020, guess what? I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I can't stay stuck on that day.
Yeah.
I have to do things like write a book or start a church or, you know, I got to move forward on what God has for our lives, because guess what? Whatever we're doing might help somebody else that's dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with, that lost a child, that lost someone close to them, that lost a friend, that lost a parent, that lost someone in their lives, lost their job, lost their house, lost their car, lost their whatever it is, you know, whatever it might be. You know, this is going to help them. If somebody picks up my book or sees what I'm doing or hears what I'm saying or whatever, you know, it's not because I'm trying to tout me. I'm not. I'm trying to tout God and what he's done for me the last 43 months. You know, it's not, I haven't done anything. It's not me. If it was me, I'd be drunk. If it was me trying to do it, I'd been out drinking.
I'm so glad you didn't go back to that, because
trust me, it wasn't because I didn't want to. How's that for candor?
The pain leads us to.
There's a couple of different times where I'm real close to going and getting a bottle and a pack of smokes and sitting out on my back porch and getting hammered out of my mind and smoking my brains out. A couple different times. And God reminded me, well, so what kind of message is that going to send? Because nobody would have known, but he would have. Nobody would have known. It wasn't like I was going to go out to the bar and do it in public. I was going to stay at my house, but he would have known, and I would have known.
You're a strong man, Will.
Nah, God's strong. I'm just, his strength is sufficient for me.
Receiving his strength is a form of strength. You know, being able to receive his love and borrow his strength is so inspirational, because so many people give up, fold in, blame God, ask questions, and we're only here for a little bit. I try to not even think about it. I have fences in my brain that don't even want to consider the idea, and it's so painful. I don't even want to think about it. So
I encourage people not to.
I have so much respect for you, brother. I have so much love and respect for you, for your strength, and there are parents out there that are not able to deal with this pain, and they need your message. They need your book.
There's more people out there than you know that have lost children. It's crazy how God has put people in my life that I had no idea that they lost kids.
You know, David lost his kid in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whips.
Lost a couple, actually.
Couple, yeah. And he, you know, his message is a message of hope, because he says, one day I will come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that we do die. All of us are going to die. And I do believe we're going to go to a better place. And they are already there. And Jesus suggests, let the dead bury the dead. And it sounds kind of mean, you know, kind of rude, but it's a message of hope for me, because it means, hey, they're good. Trust me. We're here. We still have unfinished business here.
That's what he was telling them, is when he said that to somebody, one of his disciples, let your dead bury the dead. The thing of it is the father wasn't even dead yet. He wanted to hang around and wait for him to die.
Right.
He wanted to hang around, and Jesus was like, "Come on, dude, we got work to do. You can't wait around for him to die. We gotta go spread the news of the kingdom. Come on, let's go."
That's why it's kind of mean. You know, it sounds like on the first read. And in Matthew, there's another one. I don't know if it's on the same chapter, but he says, if you don't, in order to be my disciple, you must hate your wife, hate your kids, hate your
Right.
family. And when you read that, it looks like, whoa, hold on. I
Right.
thought that this stuff is only in the Old Testament, but not from you, Jesus.
Right.
And we had deep discussion with my wife about it. And I think, look, when Peter left for 2 years and his wife lost his child and he wasn't there, to the observer, to the neighbor, he must have thought Peter must hate his child,
Right.
must hate his wife. So what Jesus meant is, when you follow me as a disciple, to the observer, it looks like you hate everything else. And if it
Right.
does, then you don't put me first.
Right.
And I recently got into an accident. It was like a second time I got into an accident. And it's just a refresher, it's just a reminder of how what life is. It's like it could go in a moment. It's like it's gone. And it just recalibrate my purpose, my focus. Like, hey, don't waste this. Whatever, however long we are here, don't waste it. We have
Right.
one purpose, one mission. And I'm so glad that he gave his life to Jesus. I'm so glad that he left 2 kids, and they're gonna be. They don't necessarily have to be fatherless. As long as they know Jesus, and that's your duty as a grandpa to lead them. You know, it's so tough, brother. It's so tough what you went through. And I want to give you some love. Somehow I want to transfer my love into your heart, but you receive unlimited amount from our Father. And uh, please share your book. I'm gonna put the link. And for those of you that are watching, listening to this, please support Will. He is on a mission to save souls, to give hope and comfort to those that are in incredible pain. No parent should be going through this. This is just such an incredible pain. There's nothing that's comparing to this. So please share with us, how can people join your church? How can people get into one-on-one conversation with you? How can people read your book so they could receive a little bit of hope, a little bit of comfort?
So my website is willramseyspeaks.com. The book is actually, there's a link on there. If you want to get the book, you can go on Amazon. It's a father's journey through darkness, growth from the loss of a son. It's on Amazon. It's available there as well. You can reach out to me personally. Facebook message me. I've had people do that. And if you want an autographed copy, and like I said, it's on Amazon. That's the actual book itself. It's not a long read, but it's very very emotionally packed. You can also, if you want to look into the church, it's Hope City Church, Texas. The word is spelled out, Texas. Hope City Church, www.hopecitychurch, Texas. And we meet every Sunday at 11 a.m. A little civic club here up the street from our house. It's 1700 Oblate Road, Canyon Lake, Texas, 78133. We're renting a little building up there. Yep. HopeCityChurchTexas.com. And that'll tell you a little bit about the church, tell you a little bit about Julie and I. And as I said, if you want to reach out to me through Facebook Messenger, if you want a book that's signed, I send out, I've sent out copies all the time via that way. And I have Venmo and PayPal and all those different things. I even had a guy mail me a check, believe it or not. He wanted my address. He didn't have any of the pay stuff. So he just mailed me a check. So, but I'd love to get my book in your hands. If it's something that anybody would be interested in. Again, not a long read, but it's packed full of how I got to this point. It's packed full of what I dealt with depression and darkness and anger and hurt and all those different things. The first 36 months of Brock having passed. So
I'm sure there are people watching right now that are experiencing pain for losing a loved one. Is there any practical steps that you could? I'm sure there are people pulling their hair right now, and they're like, "What should I do? What do I do?" Is there anything practical besides prayer, besides spending time with God? Is there anything practical that you do?
The biggest thing, honestly, one of the biggest things for me was to realize that whatever you're feeling at the moment is normal. You know, I've heard people over and over, what's wrong with me? Well, you're grieving. You're grieving. Understand you're going to be angry. Understand you're going to be upset. Understand that you may say things that you don't necessarily mean. Understand that whatever you're dealing with, it's not you know, the 7 steps of grief, or how many steps they say of grief, they're not linear. They're not. One day you could be angry, one day you could be happy, one day you could be sad, one day you could be this, one day you could be that. It's not a linear process. You know, there's still days that I wake up and go, oh my gosh, I don't want to get up. There's still days that I get up and I'm ticked. I'm mad. I don't know why. You know, and the other thing that people need to remember is your body remembers. So if you're a year in and something happened on a particular day that you don't necessarily remember happened, you know, like something. So just to give you an example, I had a really bad day. You know, this doesn't sound goofy, but a year after Brock passed, I think it was a couple weeks before that, I just terrible day. You know, it was just awful. Okay. And so what happens is a year later, your body remembers that terrible day, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So a better example would be is initially when Brock passed. So Brock passed on a Tuesday. So it would start on Sunday evening. I would start having anxiety. I would start being anxious. I would start being upset. It would start on Sunday night. And then I'd wake up Monday morning and it'd be like I've been hit by a truck.
Mm.
And you know what was going on is Tuesday was coming.
Yeah.
And my body knew Tuesday was coming. And it had made up its mind that Tuesday was a bad day. My body had made that up. It wasn't me or my brain. It was subconsciously, it knew Tuesday was coming. And so every week on Sunday night, it would happen for the first, I don't even know, first probably 6 months. Every Sunday night, I would go through that. And over time, I had to get help. I got counseling. You know, I went to a Christian counselor and had somebody to talk. You got to find somebody that's not involved. They can't be involved.
Yeah.
You have to find a counselor, Christian counselor, that you can sit down with and talk and just vomit everything that's in your heart, everything that's in your mind, everything. Just vomit and cry and vomit and cry and talk and cry and vomit. Just anything that's inside of you needs to come out. And I did that. And you know, the practical steps is understanding that all that's normal. That's probably the biggest thing, because I don't know how many times I've seen people, what's wrong with me? You're grieving. That's what's wrong with you. You're grieving.
Word of hope to close this.
Word of hope. Jesus is always there. Give your heart to Jesus. You have to. It's the only way through it. It's the only way through it. Because if you don't, eventually something's going to break. I don't know how else to say it. You know, God's been with me the last 43 months. 43 months and 15 days. So, I mean, I say this in the book, you know, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train, it's Jesus.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about when you talk about the body. I used to mark in calendar. I would mark certain events, good, bad, you know, just write a little bit in those big calendars. And I've noticed a pattern of bad days on the same year.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped doing it. I'm like, I'm not going to subconsciously lead myself to these patterns.
Right.
Because it literally takes you out. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that you're doing with your mind. It's maybe the heart that is protecting. I don't know what it is, but I've experienced similar thing with annual events. And I
Yes.
think, oh man, 3 years in a row, on this day, I'm having a terrible day. Why is this happening? And it's probably because the body remembers.
Yes. 100%.
Well, I love you, brother, from the bottom of my heart. I
Love you
love
too, bro.
and I will always be there for you if you need me during this time. If you need someone to talk to, I admire your strength, and I admire your faith, and your hope is inspirational. And we don't know how many days we have on this earth, and it's painful. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I know how difficult it is for you to talk about it, and it's been hard to just even listen to what you went through, and you're the one who went through it. So I love you from the bottom of my heart, and
Love you
I'm
too, bro.
so sorry you had to go through this pain. There is hope.
Amen.
There is
Yes,
hope.
sir.
So please, everybody that is watching this, support Will any way you can, whether you can buy his book or you can join his church. He is seeking people to heal with his story. We need each other. Sometimes we need to borrow faith. Sometimes we need to lend faith. We need to borrow hope. It's kind of like a lighter that has gas but doesn't have a spark. So he has the spark for you. He has the spark for you, and it's healing him the more he heals you. So please connect with Will, be part of his life, join him, follow him. He needs you, you need him. Let's love and support each other. Make it a great day, brother. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me, bro.